So the most important thing to know about anxiety straight out of the gate is it gotten an unnecessarily bad rap. As a, if- you should know that psychologists have long understood that anxiety has both healthy forms and unhealthy forms, and a lot of the anxiety experienced at day to day is healthy. What makes anxiety healthy? Anxiety is healthy when it's serving as an alarm system that lets us know that something is not right, but it gets our attention, helps us to keep ourselves safe. So if you're driving and something swerves and cuts you off, and you have a certain anxiety, that's good thing. It will focus on your intention, it safer maneuvers, but it's good for the respawn. If you're entirely indifferent and relaxed in the setting, it's not as safe. So we look for anxiety to be helped us, to guide us and to let us know what we're supposed to doing and not do. I care for I will say to them, if you walk into the party, there's going to be a little get together, kind of while, and you feel anxious, pay attention to that reaction. That's telling you something, indicating that you may not be as safe as you thought you could be. So that could be so that is the healthy anxiety. Only time we consider anxiety as unhealthy is under two conditions. One, when we have anxiety but there is no threat, that there is nothing wrong. So if lovely Sunday morning and you are driving and no traffic, you shouldn't be having anxiety respond in that moment. And if you do, we will consider that not concern. The other time we pay attention to anxiety and consider it to be unhealthy is if the anxiety response is way too big for what's happening. Something is worse and cuts you off and you have a panic attack in that moment. That's not healthy anxiety, and we would address it clinically. Other than that, anxiety largely useful and healthy. All the same, it feels tearful. It doesn't feel even if it's actually serving for useful purpose. It's really great to know how to get in check if you want to. And that's how, and that's what I'm going to teach you. Our experience of anxiety is cut out of control, certain takes control, but despite that, the reality is the anxiety is probably the most systematic human emotion. It's very stepwise. It really goes off the rails. I'm gonna walk you through the one, two, three of how anxiety unfolds for all of us, and then we're gonna come back and I'm gonna show you how every step of way that you can do to bring that anxiety back to control. First thing is our body react, physical reaction that we have, very familiar to all of us. Heart rate accelerates, breathing really gets quick, it feels uncomfortable, but activated, that can hyperventilating sense of breathing, everybody knows that feeling. What's happening here? The sympathetic nervous system, which is the part of our nervous system that is paying attention to the sympathetic around us, is kicking off some degree of response. And in the fight or flight response, we're ready to get run or attacked. So sympathetic nervous system is taking measures to send a whole lot of heavily oxygenated blood out to our large muscle groups for that purpose. That's why this happens. Especially for caring for people not ever heard this ever before, it can be really helpful to understand that a stranger's reaction is, it has a certain ancient logic to it, may not fit the moment, but that really makes sense. And it's not something going out of fact. So that's the first thing that happens. The second thing that happens is we notice that change in our body and we come to the conclusion that we call it anxiety. We decide to use that label. This is often an arbitrary decision. We can call it something else, but we can sometimes default unharmfully call it anxiety. And then the third thing happens is where things really go off. If as we
And the
as we engage in
definition of catastrophic
catastrophe
thinking is actually very straightforward.
thinking.
It's when we overestimate
When
the
we
risks and
overestimate
we
the things and
underestimate
we
our ability to
underestimate
manage
the
the risks.
ability to manage
That's
the
it.
risk, that's
Okay,
it.
so if you
So
your body
if your
reacts,
body
you're like, oh, I must
reacts,
be
feel
anxious.
like
Oh my gosh,
I
this
must be
situation is
anxious, oh my
completely
gosh,
out of control and
this
there's not enough
situation
of me to stop
completely
it.
out of control,
That's when anxiety
that's
really
when
becomes
anxiety
trouble.
really comes
And that's the
trouble.
1, 2, 3.
And that's
All
one,
right,
two,
so
three.
knowing that,
Knowing
let's
that,
go back and
let's
hit
go
every
back
one
and
of
hit
these in
every
terms
one
of
of
how we
these
can work
terms of
against
how
them.
we can work
So
against
the
them.
first one, the
So the
body
first
reacting.
one, body
Okay,
reacting.
so one of the
So
most
one of the
powerful
most
ways to get
powerful
the
ways to
body
get
to calm
body to
down
calm down
is through
is
controlled
through
breathing.
control breathing.
And I will tell you,
And
if
I
you're
will
having
tell you,
like
if
this
you're
kind of
having
really
like this
breathing, like you're going
really
through a
breathing,
breathing,
you're gonna
I
breathe.
totally get it.
I
For
totally get it.
years, I was
For
like, oh,
years
that's
of,
so woo-woo, that's
well,
not that technical, it's
that's
not
not
that
technical,
scientific.
that's not
Okay, I
scientific.
was wrong.
I
I
was
learned I
wrong.
was wrong.
I learned I was
And in
wrong.
fact,
And in
breathing
fact,
is this
breathing is
really
this really
biological intervention.
biological
And
invention.
what it does
And
is
what
it
it does is
kickstarts the
kickstarts the
parasympathetic part of our
parasympathetic
nervous
part
system.
of our nervous
And the
system.
parasympathetic
And
nervous system,
parasympathetic
its
nervous
job
system
is to
is job
reset the
to
body to
reset
its
the body
resting
to its
state.
resting
Okay, here's
state.
how this works.
Here
It's
is
kind of
how this
amazing.
works.
So just as the brain
Just as the
can
brain
signal to the
can
heart and
signal
lungs,
to
like,
the
go into
heart,
overdrive,
go on
you might have to do
overdrive,
something
and
here.
you have to do something
We
here.
also have
We
a mind
also have
that
a
the
mind
lungs can
that
communicate back to the brain.
communicate back to the
So when we're
brain.
anxious, we're
So when
breathing
we're
quickly
actions
and,
for
kind of
breathing quickly
shallowly.
and
And if
shallowly,
we
and if
override
we
that, if we
overwrite that, if
deliberately
we
deepen and
deliberately
slow our
deepen
breathing, what
and
we
slow
are
our
doing, this is
breathing,
sort of the understood science, is that we are hacking
we are
into a
hacking
set of
into the
nerves on
ascent
the
of
surface of
nerves
our
and
lungs that are stretch
the
receptors.
stretch
And
receptors.
all day, every
And
day,
all day, every
those
day,
nerves
those nerves
are
are
paying attention to our
paying
breathing
attention
to
to our
keep us safe.
breathing to keep us safe.
And they
And
notice
they
that we have slowed
notice
our
that we
breathing
have
and
slowed
things have
our
gotten
breathing
calmer.
and this
And they read
things
that as
gotten
evidence of safety
calmer.
because we only
This is
breathe quickly and
evidence of
slowly when we're safe. And they
safer
send that message up to
safety,
the brain saying,
and this sends
you're
the
kind of having a reaction that
message
doesn't
to
make sense
brain.
because the
It
nerves
doesn't
on the
make
lungs are
sense
telling us
because
that we must be safe.
nurse saying
And
we
that's
are
how anxiety
safe,
comes under
and that's
control.
how anxiety
That's
comes more
step one.
control. That's
Step
step one.
two,
Step
if we want
two,
to, need to,
if you want to,
is to consider whether anxiety is the right name for what's happening.
you should
That
call
we have a kind of
anxiety
activated
with
response all the time. So it might be that,
right name.
I was excited for this presentation, and before this presentation, I kind
If
of felt a little bit of a rev. I could have said, oh, I must be anxious. And
I'm
instead, I said, no, I think I'm really excited. And that
I
shift in thinking
I could
can
have
make
said
a
I'm
huge difference in terms of how
anxious,
we
but I
feel
said
about what
I'm
we're
really
managing.
in.
The third thing we want to watch out for
Third
is
thing
anxiety going
we
off the
wanna
rails with catastrophic thinking.
look out
Again,
for
that's
is
overestimating
catastrophic
risk and
thinking.
underestimating our ability to handle it. So if something is feeling really,
Something is
really
really feeling
scary to you, really,
scary,
really anxiety
really
provoking,
anxiety
key
provoking.
questions to
Key
ask yourself
question to
are,
ask
am
yourself
I
are:
imagining
am
this
I
to be worse than
imagining
it
it
might
to be
really
worse
be?
than
So
it
you're going to
might
try to
really
bring
be?
that estimation
You're
of
gonna
risk
bring
down.
that
And
estimation to.
also, do I have
Do
more
I
say
have
in how this is
more
going to
say
go
in
than I'm
how this
giving
is
myself
gonna
credit for? Are
go,
there things I can do
or
to
things I
actually
can do
increase my
to
sense
increase my
of
sense
control,
of
not feel as
control, not
helpless as
feel
I
as
do right now?
helpless as
So
I
you're not
do
trying to
right
get
now?
rid of the
So you're
anxiety
gonna try
entirely,
to
but you're
get
trying to
rid
sort of
of
get it in a narrower
anxiety
band,
entirely,
like
but
not
never
overestimating
overbending, not
risk and not
underestimating,
underestimating your own
overestimating
powers.
or underestimating.
Okay, so I'm going to start to
I'm
wrap up,
gonna
but here
start to
is the
wrap up.
bottom
Here
line.
is the bottom line.
Most of the time,
Most of the
we don't need to
time,
feel
we
anxious
don't
about
need to
feeling
feel
anxious. It
anxious
really
about
is going
feeling
to help us
anxious.
out. And whether
And
we want
whether
it
it's
there or not, or whether it's helping us
not,
or not, if we want to get it
if you
under
wanna get
control,
it under
knowing
control,
the basics
knowing
of
the
how it
basics
unfolds
of how it
really does
unfolds
put you
really
in the
does
driver's seat of knowing
of
how to
knowing
calm
how
yourself
you
when you
calm
feel
yourself
anxious.
when you feel
And so you
anxious,
don't have to
and
feel
so
like
you
it's
don't have to
something
feel
you're
like
at the
it's
mercy of.
something you're at the mercy
You
of.
spoke about breathing
You
and
spoke about
how you were
breathing and how
skeptical
we're
in the early
skeptical in
days.
the
Do
early
you
days. Do you
have a
have
particular
a
breathing
particular
practice
breathing
you like?
practice you like?
I do. Once I
I
got
do.
over my
Once I
snobbery
go over my
about
snobbery
breathing,
about
I
breathing,
use something
I
called
use
square breathing
something
or
called
box
square breathing
breathing.
or
And
box breathing.
most
Breathing.
people have probably
Most
heard of this,
people
and it's
people
really
love to
simple.
hear
It's where
this, and
you
it's
breathe
really
in on a
simple
count
when you
of three.
breathe in
So
count of
one, two,
three.
three, and I'm
One,
actually
two,
going to walk us
three.
through it as a group. Then you hold it for
Then
a
you
count of
hold it
three,
for a
one, two,
count of
three.
three,
Then you exhale
and
slowly
exhale
on a
slowly
count of three,
on
one,
the
two,
count of
three, and then
three.
you
One, two,
wait
three, and you
for one, two,
wait.
three. So
One, two, three.
1, 2, 3
One, two,
in,
three
one,
in. in,
Three,
1, 2,
hold
3,
it.
hold,
One,
1,
two,
2,
three,
3,
exhale. One,
exhale,
two,
1,
three,
2,
wait.
3,
Okay,
wait.
so let's all do it together, but here's
Let's
my
all do it
instruction to
all
you.
together, but here's my
If you
instruction to
really
you.
want
If
this
you
to
really
work,
want this to work,
picture
picture
the
the
nerves on the
nerves
surface of
on
your
the surface
lungs
of your
getting the
lungs getting
message.
the
You're not just
message.
breathing to breathe,
It's
right?
not
You're
just
breathing
breathing,
because you are
but you're
hacking into
breathing
the
because you're
system
hacking to the
and using
system
those
and
nerves
using
to
those nerves
communicate
to
to your brain
communicate to
that
your
everything's
brain
okay.
that
All right.
everything's okay.
So everybody like blow out breath a little bit. All right, ready? Breathe in slowly. One,
One,
two,
breathing slowly. One,
three.
two, three.
Hold it.
Hold it.
One,
One,
two,
two, three.
three. Exhale slowly.
Exhale
One,
slowly. One,
two,
two,
three.
three.
Now pause.
Now pause.
One,
One,
two.
two, three.
That's it.
That's it.
And you can do it a
And
few
you can do it a
times.
few
If you're
times. If
feeling
you're
anxious a lot,
completely
you should be practicing
anxious,
this when
you
you're
should be
not anxious, so
practicing
you
when
can
you're not
slip right
anxious.
into
You
that
can
groove.
slip into the
But it
groove.
is
But
powerful.
it
It
is
is really
powerful. It is
powerful.
really
And
powerful. And
I'm a
I'm
little
a
embarrassed
little
about how long it
embarrassed
took me
about
to
how
get on
long
the
it get me
breathing
to
training.
uh,
I mean, it's actually incredible because just
learn this
doing that with
breathing.
you, the little ball of
Little ball of
whatever
whatever
excitement in my stomach
excitement in my
just sort
stomach
of dissipates.
just disappears.
Yeah. So breathing
So
people, it's
breathing
real, it's
people
important.
is real, it's
So
important.
we already
So
have
we
some
already have
questions
some
floating in,
questions
and I
floating
want to
in,
make this
and I want to make this
useful for the
useful
members.
for
So
the
let's get right to
members.
them. First up,
First step,
Gordon wants to know
Gordon wants to
about helping
know
other people.
about
How can
helping
we
other
help
people. How can we
if we
help
notice that a
if we
friend
notice
or a
that our
family
friend or
member
family
is
member is
experiencing,
experiencing
excessive anxiety?
excessive anxiety?
Okay, I love this question.
I love
So
this question.
the first thing
The
I would say,
first thing
just
I
by
would
being
say is just
generally
by being
useful,
generally useful
is
is
we'll get to the
we will
excessive
get to the
piece,
excessive
but just
piece, but just
people need
people at
validation
the
that anxiety makes
validation
sense
that
most of the
anxiety
time.
makes sense
And one of
most of
the
the time.
real
And one of the
hazards
real
of
hazards
anxiety
of
being talked about
anxiety
as
of
though it's
being talked
everywhere
about
and
is
always
everywhere and always
pathological
pathological
is that
is
people
that people
experience normal
experience normal
anxiety and then they think,
anxiety
oh,
and
I'm
that they
having
think
anxiety. Oh
I'm having
no,
anxiety. Oh
there's something
no,
really
there is
wrong.
something really wrong.
And so
And
one
so
quick thing you can
one
do to
quick
say
thing you
something
can
who's
do to
anxious
say
if you're like, oh
something
my
is,
gosh, I have a big
oh my
talk
gosh,
tomorrow
I
and
have
I'm
a
anxious.
big
You can say,
talk, I'm
you're
anxious.
having the right
You're having
reaction,
the right
actually.
reaction.
Like that's going to give you
That's
energy
gonna
because
give you
there's nothing
energy.
wrong with
There's
being
nothing
anxious
wrong
about a
with
talk, or there's nothing wrong with
being
having to go tell your
anxious
boss something they don't want to hear and that making you
and
anxious.
that making you
That's
anxious.
evidence that you
That's
work
evidence
perfectly,
that you
right? So that
work
alone
perfectly.
reassures
That
people a
alone
lot.
reassures people a
And
lot.
then
And
I think
then
the next
I
step
think the
you
next
can
step you
do
can
is to
do is
say,
to
if
say,
it gets
if it
uneasy, if it
gets
gets to
easy,
be
if it
too
gets
much,
to be
more
too much,
anxiety than
more
is helpful
anxiety
to
than
you,
it's
right?
helpful
Even
to you.
framing it is like,
Even
it should help
framing
you
it
out
like it
until it
should
doesn't.
help you out, it doesn't.
You can actually
You can
dial it back.
actually dial
So
it back
walk them
and
through
walk
why
them
breathing
through
works.
while breathing
Everybody knows they're
works.
supposed to breathe.
Everything not
Very few
supposed
people
to
know
breathe.
why
Very
until they have
people
something
know
wrong with
why.
it. And so when
This
I'm
don't,
caring
they
for
don't
people, I will
do it.
say,
I
think
will
about your
say, think
anxiety being
about your
at a dial,
anxiety being
right?
a
And if
diet.
if
And
it's a
if
0 to
you're,
10
it's
dial,
your 10
2 to
dial,
3,
2
you
to
actually
3, you
tend to
actually tend
do a
to
better job
do a
with
better
whatever
job
you're
at whatever
needing to do
you're
if you
needing
have a
to
little
do
energy
if
in
you're
your head.
having.
Once it gets into 4,
Once
5,
it
6,
gets
7,
to 4,
you
5,
start to get
6,
in trouble.
7, you start
And so
to
I
get in
teach people
trouble.
to
So I teach
use the
people to
breathing
use the
actually
breathing,
turn down
actually
the
turn
dial.
down the
But
dial.
that idea of like you're
That
not
the idea
immersed
of
with
you are
this, you
not
can
immersed
be
of
in the
this, you
driver's
can
seat
be in
on this, or
driver's
you can
seat on this,
use
you can
breathing or
use breathe
reframing
or be
or
framing
questioning
or
or venting
questioning your
is
thinking
really helpful
is really
because there is a
helpful
general
because
sense of like
there's a
we're hopelessly free
general
from
sense
anxiety
of,
and we're really not.
So
but we are
Katerina
not. Can
describes
we
an
describe
anxiety
an
that
anxiety
leads
to
them
lead
to
them
avoid
to avoid
things. So meeting new people
meeting
because
new
it's
people because
scary.
it's scary?
What do you recommend
Do
for that
you
kind of
what do you recommend for that kind
avoidance
of
tactic
avoidance
around
tactic
anxiety?
around anxiety?
Oh, Katerina, I am so glad you brought up avoidance.
Katerina,
This is
I'm so
actually the
this is
most important
actually
thing
this
we
is the
need to
most
say when it
important we
gets to
need to
talking
say
about
when it comes to
anxiety.
talking about anxiety.
So
So
when we're frightened
when
of
we're
something,
frightened of something,
our instincts
our
are like,
instincts
get
are
away.
like get away.
And and if that
If
is a
that
tiger
is a
or a bad
tiger
driver,
or a bad driver,
those are really good
those are
instincts.
really good instincts.
And
And
so when we
so
remain
when we
frightened of
remain
something in our
frightened of
everyday lives,
something
we
in
can actually
everyday
get very
lives,
compelled to avoid it.
we're very compelled to
Here
avoid it.
is,
Here
if you
is,
remember
if you
anything
remember
from what
anything
we talked
from
about
one
today, these are the three
to,
words I want
to
you to remember
there's
most.
the three words you want
Avoidance
to remember.
feeds anxiety.
Avoidance feeds anxiety.
So here's the
So
process. It's
here is
actually a
the
wonderfully, I think it's fascinating science on this. So
wonderful, fascinating
say,
science on this.
Katerina, you're
Say,
thinking about
Katerina,
going to a party. Like you've been
you are
invited to a
going to
party
you are
and
invited to
okay, I'm gonna
party.
try to go to this party.
I'm going to try this
And
go
then
to this party.
it's
And
time to go to the
then
party and you
when you go
feel
to
your
party,
anxiety
you feel
starting to bubble up and
anxiety.
you're like, forget it. I'm gonna
Forget it.
cancel. Okay,
I'm gonna
here's what's gonna
cancel.
happen.
Here's what's gonna
You'll go
happen.
from feeling
You go
very, very
from
anxious
feeling very,
to
very
suddenly feeling
anxious to
much, much
suddenly
better.
you feel much, much
So
better.
this is the
So this
first
is the
helping
first
of how avoidance feeds
thing how
anxiety, which
avoidance
is
feed
that
anxiety,
it feels
which is
good.
that it feels good.
We call it a reinforcing
We
experience.
call
You
the
felt bad, you avoided,
reinforcing
you feel better.
experience
So you're like, avoidance
So you
yeah,
like
fun.
avoidance
Fun, but it solves the problem.
because it solves the
Here
problem.
comes the second
You
helping.
comes as a second
Because you
helping
haven't
because
gone to
you
the
haven't
party,
gone to the
nothing
party. Nothing
challenges your
challenges
beliefs
your
about how frightening that party is. The
that
party
part. The
remains
party
whatever
remains
you have
whatever
pictured in
you
your
have
mind.
pictured in
People
your
like
mind.
talking to
People
you,
like talking to you. People whatever. Whatever you had
about what makes
imagined about
something
what makes a
scary
party scary
unchallenged.
goes unchallenged.
If you actually go to the
If
party,
you actually go to the
you often
party,
find it's a little bit,
you
if
will
not a lot,
find
better than you expected. But if you don't go,
yourself a lot better
it
than you
remains very frightening.
expected.
So that is how
That's
avoidance
how
actually
avoidance
strengthens
actually
anxiety over time. It feels good to do it, and it
structures
actually doesn't
anxiety
give us
over
any
time,
completing
doesn't
data.
give us any completing
So
data.
when you go see
When
a
you go
clinician
see a clinician
for
for
treatment
treatment
of
of
anxiety,
anxiety,
often we will start
often
by
we will
asking about
start
what
by
you're
asking about
avoiding as
what
a
you're
result of your
avoiding
anxiety.
as a result of
And we will
anxiety.
work with
We will
you
work with
on,
you
we call
on,
it
we
graduated
call it
exposure, which is
graduated
like basically
exposure, which
baby
is
steps,
basically baby steps,
getting you in there.
getting in
So
there.
we'll say, okay, could you go
Say,
to a
could you
small
go
thing
to
with
a
a couple
small thing
people,
with a
right?
couple
Could you
people?
use your
Could you
breathing to
use your
make that
breathing to
bearable?
make
All right, and we would just sort of
bare minimum?
work you into it
Work
very,
into
very
it very,
slowly
very slowly,
because the
because the
solution to
solution to
anxiety is often what we
anxiety
call
is
exposure.
often
You're just making yourself do it.
exposure, making
But
yourself
you are
doing it.
not alone
But you're not
in this
alone in
sense
the
of like,
sense of like,
you know,
you know,
why not just
why not
not go? It
just
feels
that
better
go
to
if
not
it's
go.
better
And
to not
that's
go?
something that we as
That's
clinicians work really,
something
really
we
hard on. And
clinicians really
I will tell
hard
you,
on.
you know, the
It's
pandemic
the
and kids and
pandemic and
school
kids and
made it.
school,
And, you know, we've
and
always known if
we
a school
always
staff is
know
frightened of
if
school, the
it's
solution is
the
get
solution
them away from
is
school.
get
Even if
them
they
to
sit
school,
in the
even if they
teacher's, like,
sit in the
back
teacher's
office for
back
the day.
office for a day.
Physically being in
Physically
school is
being in
better
school
than being
better
at
than
home
being at
if it's
home,
otherwise
if
safe
it's
for them.
otherwise safe to be
So
them there.
area of anxiety
Another
that's
area of
popping up in the
anxiety is
chat
popping up in the chat
is
is
dealing with it in
dealing
our
with
sort
it
of
in
children.
sort of children.
Robert wants to
Robert
know
wants to know
what
what
or are there any
or are
differences
there any
between words like
differences between words like
anxiety and
anxiety and worry or
fear
fear
as it might pertain
as
to
it
how
might pretend to
teenagers
have teenagers
describing
describing or putting name to
what they're feeling?
what they are feeling?
I think it means
I
simply
think
whatever it means.
it means
But I
whatever
will
it
say
means, but I will
teenagers use
say
the term
teenagers use
anxiety
the
a
term
lot,
anxiety a
and they
lot
use it
and
very
use it for
broadly.
very broadly.
And
And I am
I've been practicing, and I've
I'm
been practicing for a
practicing
very long time.
for a
Like
very
over the
long
last, I'd
time.
say, 10 years, I started to
I
notice like,
can
I use
say
this term
10
a lot.
years.
And I wasn't quite
I
sure what to make
wasn't
of it. And
quite
then I was
sure to
actually
make if
rereading
I was
Jane
reading
Eyre.
Chain
No,
Air,
Pride and
Chain
Prejudice.
Air,
And
and
Mrs. Bennet. I don't know if you remember her.
Mrs.
She's like the
Bennet.
kind of piece of work
She's
mom in
kind
that
of
book.
piece of.
There
Mhm.
was a line in the book
Yes, a
that
line
was,
in the book that
whenever
was,
Mrs. Bennet was
whenever Mrs.
discontented,
Bennet
she fancied herself to
discontented,
be
she.
nervous. And I thought, oh,
Oh,
I think that's often
I
what I'm
think
seeing with
that's often
teenagers
what I'm
is
seeing
they'll
with
say,
teenagers. They
I
will
feel
say, I feel
anxious,
anxious,
when
when they
they mean
usually mean
I don't
not
feel calm.
calm. I don't feel calm.
And so
And so
the first thing I
the
would say
first
for
thing I will
teenagers
do
is I
for
feel
teenagers,
anxious
I
is to
feel
say, tell me what's
anxious,
going on.
is
And they
tell me
might
what's
say,
going on.
I've got a big tryout tomorrow,
Tryout tomorrow,
or,
or
I'm really, this
I'm
concert
there
is
is
happening,
concert
I'm
that is
going to with my
happening,
friends.
going I'm
And
gonna
listen
with
for the
my
possibility that
friends.
it's something besides
There's
anxiety.
something
It could be
beside
they're
anxiety, could
excited,
be
they're
their
amped, they're
anxiety,
apprehensive.
they're
So
apprehensive.
try to
So try to
make more
make
granular
more
their description of what is
their
causing the stirred up feeling. And sometimes they are anxious,
sometimes
and
they are
that's when there's
anxious, and
threat,
that's
right?
when
They're like,
there
I'm
is
feeling
threat.
anxious
I'm feeling
because I have my
anxious
driver's
because
test
I have
tomorrow
my
and I
driver
cannot
test
study. Okay,
tomorrow.
that is anxiety.
That is
There is a threat. They
anxiety.
could
There
fail
is
that
threat.
driver's
They
test,
can
right? So
fail that
listen for threat, and
test.
then if they do
Listen
have
that
anxiety,
if you
if they're
have
anxious about something, be
anxiety,
like,
if
yeah,
you
well, of course you're anxious. Like, that's kind of
pressure
scary.
anxiety is kind of
Let's see what we can do
scary.
to
You can
reduce your
do to
sense of risk,
reduce your sense of
increase your
risk,
sense of control.
sense of
But
or control,
often
but often
it's very
it's very
important that
important
we
that we
help them
help them
bring more
bring
nuance
more
to the language they use around these
words
sort of
to
things that
language
can
they
stir it up.
use around.
And what's so nice
And what's so
is
nice
that
is
act of a
that
teenager
act of
saying, or a kid
teenagers
saying,
saying
I
or
feel really
kids saying,
anxious
I
about,
feel really
school
anxious
tomorrow.
about
Let's make
school
you anxious.
tomorrow.
Or like
What's making
your
you
classroom,
anxious?
your
Your
kids,
classroom,
like
your
I don't know
kids.
where things are gonna be
Don't know
like.
where it's
We
going to
say,
be like.
yeah, like
Yeah,
you should feel
you should
apprehensive.
feel
Like that is like
apprehensive
there's a
that
lot
is
there, and
like
also
there's
maybe
a
a
lot
little
there.
excited.
Also,
If
you
you
mean
can
anxiety.
get in there with words that
Get
are
in the
more
words
accurate
with
than the big
more
generic
accurate and the
of
big
anxiety,
chunk of
that
anxiety.
act is in and of
That
itself
act
therapeutic.
is
Kids are like, yes, I am apprehensive
I am
and excited,
apprehensive
right? That they
and
feel
I'm
heard, they feel
excited. They
better,
feel hurt,
and
they
they have a
feel
better
better
language.
and have a better
So,
language. So
what I watch
what
for
I watch
questions
for
is kids saying, I have
question is
anxiety.
kids having anxiety.
I like to say,
I
you're
like
feeling
this
anxious.
is you're
Because I
feeling
think when there is
anxious.
this sense of like, I have anxiety,
Sense
I
of
think there's
having
very
anxiety
from
is very much among
adolescence, sense of okay,
analysis sense of
I have
like
anxiety,
I have
but it kind of
anxiety,
stays
but
well.
they
Everybody
trying to
has
say
anxiety at
everybody
some level,
have
because I don't want to be
anxiety,
dismissive, but to really help them,
but
I
to
think that
really
distinction
help
between
them
a feeling that comes and
feeling
goes and
that
adult
comes and
versus thing we need
goes
to be concerned about.
and
Several folks
there
want to
is
know how can
feeling
they
that
tell
how
when to
can they
seek help,
tell
when
when
anxiety has
anxiety
become
is become
too crippling.
too crippling.
This is a great place to wrap
It's
up,
a
right? This is a
great
perfect place to
place
wrap
to
up. So
wrap up.
mostly this
So
has been an
mostly this
ad
is
for anxiety.
ban
Like,
as
don't be
for
frightened of
anxiety.
it.
Don't be frightened of
Be
it.
curious
Be
about it.
curious about it.
Trust that it's trying to tell
Trust
you
that it's
something and it
trying to
feels
tell you
uncomfortable.
something. It
Try the
feels
strategies to get it
uncomfortable,
under
but try
control.
to get
Um,
try
but
to make
here's the
strategies for
conditions. Let's
get
go back
over
to
it.
them. If you feel
If
like
you
your
feel
anxiety is
like your
showing up
anxiety
and
is
there's no
showing up
reason,
and
like
there is
there's
no
no
reason,
threat, there's
no
nothing to be
threat,
worried about,
nothing to be
that
worried
would be a
about,
great
that
time
would
to
be a
see God.
great time to
Or
see God.
the other is if your anxiety, you're like, well,
If
there is
your
a threat, but
anxiety
my
alerts a
anxiety is
threat,
off the charts and
but
making
my
me
anxiety
miserable
off
or
the
getting in the
chart
way of my
and
life, that's a good
getting
time
and
to
making me
seek support.
miserable.
So, you know,
So
pretty
pretty
straightforward
straightforward
in
in
terms
terms
of
of
how
how we
we consider
define will be
concerning, but I really want you
concerning.
to know
What I really want
most
you to know,
anxiety
most
does not
anxiety
need to
does
make
not
you feel
need to
anxious about its
make you
own
feel
presence.
anxious.
So the most important thing to know about anxiety straight out of the gate is that
Stres
it has
hakkında bilmemiz
gotten an
gereken en önemli şeylerden
unnecessarily
bir
bad rap,
tanesi e,
as has happened for a lot of
gereğinden
medical
fazla
work.
kötü bir
But you should know
üne
that
sahip
psychologists
olması.
have long
Şunu
understood that
bilmelisiniz ki
anxiety has both
psikologlar
healthy
uzun bir
forms
süredir
and unhealthy forms,
stresin
and a
hem
lot of the anxiety we
sağlıklı hem de kötü
experience
bir
in
şey
the
olduğunu
day is
biliyorlar.
healthy. Okay,
Ve
so what
gündelik
makes anxiety
hayatımızda
healthy?
tecrübe ettiğimiz stresin büyük bir
Anxiety
çoğunluğu
is healthy
sağlıklı.
when it is serving as an alarm system that
Stres
lets us know
eğer
that
bir
something's not right,
alarm
that it
sistemi
gets
olarak
our
sizin
attention and helps us
olmaması
keep
gereken bir şey
ourselves safe.
olduğunu haber
So
vermek için
if you're
çalışıyorsa
driving and somebody
bu
swerves and cuts
sağlıklıdır.
you
Eğer
off
ki siz araba
and you
sürüyorsanız ve
have a
birisi
surge of
makas
anxiety,
attıysa
that's a good thing.
sizin
It will
belli
focus
bir
your attention,
seviyede
it will
stres
help you be safe
hissetmeniz
around that
normaldir.
driver, maybe
Çünkü
take
bu
evasive
sayede
maneuvers.
o
But it's good
sürücüden
for
daha
you to
uzak
respond. If
durabilirsiniz
you're
ve daha
entirely
güvende
indifferent or relaxed
olabilirsiniz.
in that setting, it's not as
Eğer
safe.
bu tarz bir durumda
So we look for
oldukça
anxiety to be of help to us, to guide us and to
rahatsanız
let us know
çok
what we're
da
supposed to be
iyi
doing and
değildir.
not doing. I care for a lot of
Stres
teenagers
bize yapıp
clinically,
yapmamamız
and
gereken şeyleri
I will
aslında çok
say to
güzel
them, if you walk into
ifade
a party
eder.
that you thought was going to be a little get
Eğer bir
together and it
parnoya
turned out it's kind
gidiyorsanız
of,
ve
wild and you
bir
feel
parça
anxious, pay attention to that
e,
reaction. Like
bir
that's
parça
telling you something.
korkuyorsanız
That's indicating that you may not be
stresinize
as
dikkat
safe as
edin
you thought you were
çünkü
going to be.
size bir şey
So
anlatmaya
that's healthy
çalışıyordur. Belki de
anxiety.
düşündüğünüz kadar
The only
güvende
time we
değilsinizdir.
consider anxiety to cross the line from healthy to unhealthy
Bizim
is under two
stresi
conditions actually.
sınırı aşıp da
One
artık
is when we
sağlıklı
have
değil,
anxiety, but there's no
zararlı diye
threat, that there's nothing wrong. So
adlandırdığımız
if it's,
zamanlar
a
sadece
lovely
eğer
sunny
herhangi
morning
bir
and you're taking a
tehdit yoksa ve
drive and there's no
hala
traffic nearby, you shouldn't be having an
tehdit
anxiety
altında
response in
hissediyorsanız.
that
Örneğin
moment.
araba
And
sürüyorsunuz
if
ama
you
hiç
do, we would
trafik
consider
yoksa,
that
hiçbir
grounds
araba
for
yoksa
concern.
ve
The
hala
other
stresli
time
hissediyorsanız
we pay
bu
attention
kötü
to
bir şeydir.
anxiety and consider it to be
Eğer
unhealthy
ikinci
is if the
yöntem,
anxiety response
ikinci
is
sebep
way
ise
too big for what
eğer
happened out of
sizin
proportion to
stresiniz
events.
yaşanan
So if
olay
somebody
için
swerves and cuts you off and you
oldukça
have a
büyükse,
panic attack in
örneğin
that moment,
siz
that is
araba
not healthy
sürüyorsanız ve bir
anxiety.
kişi
It's not
makas
something
attıysa ve
when we
siz bir
would
anda
address
panik
that
atak
clinically.
geçirmeye başladıysanız
Other than that, we really see
bu pek
anxiety
de
as
sağlıklı bir
largely
şey
normal,
değildir.
protective, healthy,
Ama bunlar
and useful in
haricinde
our
stresi
lives.
genellikle
Okay.
hayatımızda
All the
sağlıklı ve iyi bir
same,
şey
it
olarak
feels
görürüz.
terrible, right? I mean, I think one of the things that's so true about anxiety is it doesn't feel good even if it's actually serving a useful purpose.
Stres
And so whether
hakkındaki
the anxiety is
bildiğimiz
healthy
şeylerden bir
or
tanesi
unhealthy,
ise
it's
bizim
really great
için
to
iyi
know
ve
how to
sağlıklı bir
get
şey
it
dahi
help
olsa
if you
iyi
want to.
hissettirmiyor
And that's what
olması
I'm going to teach you now.
ve
And you
bunun
may
iyi
be
mi kötü mü
surprised
olduğunu
to hear me
anlamamız
say,
lazım
oh,
ve
let
bugün
me
size
teach
bunu
you how to do
öğreteceğim.
this.
Hadi gelin
Because
size
our
bunu
experience
nasıl
of anxiety is that it's kind of out of
anlayacağınızı
control,
öğreteyim
it
demem
sort
bir
of
parça
takes
garip
over.
hissetmiş olabilir.
But
Çünkü
despite
stres
that,
genelde
the
gerçekleştiği zaman
reality is that
kontrolü eline
anxiety
alır
is
ama
probably the most
aslında
systematic human emotion.
stres insanların
You know,
yaşadığı
built
en
in a very
sistematik
stepwise fashion. It's actually a 1, 2, 3
duygudur.
process when it really goes off the rails. And so I'm going to walk you
1
through
2
the 1,
3
2, 3 of
yöntemi
how
adını
anxiety
verdiğim
unfolds for all of
bir
us.
yöntem
And
var.
then we're going to come
Size
back
bunu
and I'm going to show
öğreteceğim.
you how at every step of the way there are things you can do to bring that anxiety back under control. Okay, so the first thing that happens when we have an anxiety response is our
Bizim
body
bir
reacts. There's
stres
actually just a physical
altına
reaction
girdiğimizde
to that.
yaşadığımız ilk
And it's
şeylerden bir
pretty universal and
tanesi
it's very familiar to all of us. Your heart rate accelerates, your
Kalp
breathing gets really quick and
ritminiz
shallow.
artar,
It feels uncomfortable. There's other
nefes
stuff happening in
alışlarınız
our lives
hızlanır,
too at the same
vücudunuzda
time, but
her
that
şey bir anda olmaya
agitated
başlar.
heart, that kind of hyperventilating sense of breathing, everybody knows that feeling.
Herkes
Okay,
bu
what's
hissi
happening?
biliyordur. Peki burada ne oluyor?
Sympathetic nervous system, which is the part of our nervous system that is paying attention to the environment, is sympathetic to what's around us, is giving
Vücudumuz
off some degree of the fight or flight
etrafımızdaki
response, right? That
şeylere bakıyor
immediate
ve
response
bizim
that we all know about.
hayatta kalma,
In the fight
savaşçı
or flight response,
içgüdülerimizi
what we want to do is get ready to run or attack. And so our sympathetic
etki altına
nervous
alıyor.
system is taking measures to send a whole lot of heavily oxygenated blood out to our large muscle groups
Bu
for
da
that
bizim
purpose.
büyük
That's why the heart accelerates. That's why
kas
breathing changes.
gruplarımıza daha çok
And
oksijen almak için
especially
çalışması
when
anlamına
you're
geliyor.
for people who have not ever heard any of this before,
Ee,
it can be really helpful.
Da bunları daha
to
önce duymamış
understand that
insanlar
as
için
strange as this reaction is, it has a sort of ancient logic to it. May not fit the moment, but it
stresin
definitely
aslında
makes sense and it's not
eski
something
zamanlardan gelen
going
bir
out of
açıklaması
whack
olduğunu
when our heart
bilmesi
and our lungs accelerate.
belki de
That's the
garip
first thing
gelmiş
that happens.
olabilir.
The second thing that happens
İkinci
is we
şey
notice
ise
that change in our
bu
bodies
değişimi fark
and we come
ettiğimizde
to the conclusion that we're going to call it anxiety. We decide to use that label.
bunu
This is often an arbitrary
stres
decision.
olarak
We could call it
adlandırmamız,
something else, but we can
bunu
sometimes
başka bir şey olarak
help unhelpfully
da
to call it
adlandırabilirsiniz ama
anxiety.
biz bunu
And then
stres
the
olarak
third
adlandırmayı
thing that
seçiyoruz. Ve
happens,
üçüncüsü
and this
ise
is where things really do go off the rails,
aslında
is
işlerin
we
kontrolden
make
çıktığı
catastrophic
yer.
thinking. Now,
Biz
the
hemen
definition of
kötü
catastrophic
bir
thinking is
düşünce
actually very
altına
straightforward.
giriyoruz.
It's when we overestimate the risks or we
Eğer
underestimate our ability to manage
riskleri
the risks.
gözümüzde
That's it.
büyütür ve
Okay, so your
yararlarını
body
gözümüzde
reacts, you're like,
küçültürsek
I must be anxious. Oh my
kontrolden
gosh, this
çıkıyor.
situation is completely out of control.
Dolayısıyla
There's nothing I can do to
vücutlarımız,
stop it.
vücudumuz ona
That's
göre
when
bir
anxiety really becomes miserable.
savunma
And
strateji
that's the one,
geçiriyor.
two,
Biz
three.
o bu çok
All
kötü
right, so
diyoruz ve bunu
knowing that, let's
gözümüzde
go
oldukça
back and
büyütüyoruz.
every one of these in terms of how we can work against them.
Gelin bu
So
üçü
the first one, the
hakkında
body
hepsini nasıl
reacting.
çözebileceğimiz
Okay,
hakkında
so
konuşalım.
one of the most
İlki
powerful
vücudumuzun
ways to
verdiği
get the
tepki.
body to calm down
Vücudumuzu
is through
sakinleştirmenin
controlled breathing.
en
And
kolay
I will
yollarından
tell
bir
you, if you're
tanesi
having
nefesimizi
like this
kontrol altına
really
almak.
breathing, like
Gerçekten
difficulty
mi,
breathing,
tecrübe
I
mi,
totally get it.
gerçekten mi
Years of
nefes
saying, oh,
almamı
that's so
diyorsanız
woo-woo, that's not that technical, it's not that scientific.
yıllar
Okay, I
içerisinde
was wrong.
çok
I
fazla
was wrong.
bu çok bilimsel
In
değil
fact,
bir
breathing
şeyler
is this
duydum ama
really
haksızdım.
biological intervention. And what it does is it kickstarts
Tecrübe
the parasympathetic part of our nervous system. And the parasympathetic nervous system, its job is to reset the body to its resting
nefesimizi
state.
kontrol altına
Okay,
almak
here's how this works. It's really
parasentetik
So just as the
sistemimizi
brain can
kontrol altına
signal to the
alıyor.
heart and lungs, like
Ee,
go into overdrive, we might have to do something here. We're also of a mind that the lungs can communicate back to the brain. So when we're anxious, we're
Ayrıca
breathing quickly and kind of shallow.
ciğerlerimiz
And if we override
beynimizle
that, we can
iletişime
really
geçebiliyor.
deepen and slow our breathing.
Eğer nefesimizi
Think what
kontrol
we're
altına
doing, this is sort of the
alabilirsek
understood science, is that we are hacking into a set of nerves on the surface of our lungs that are stretch receptors.
sistemimizdeki stres ses sebep olan
To keep us safe.
şeylere ulaşabiliriz.
And they notice that we have slowed our breathing and things have gotten calmer.
Ve
And they
bu
redirect
şeyler
the
bizim
safety because
nefesimizin
only
yavaş
breathing
olduğunu
way slowly
fark
when
edip
we're safe.
olayları
They
kontrol
send that
altına
message up to the
aldığımızı
brain
fark
saying,
eder ve
you're kind
beynimize
of having a reaction that doesn't make sense because the
şu anda
nerve
verdiğin
along is
tepki
telling us
çok
that we must be safe. And
çok
that's
mantıklı
when
değil
anxiety comes into
çünkü
control. That's step one.
ciğerlerimizden gelen
Step two, if we
mesaj
actually need to,
tam tersini
is to
söylüyor.
consider whether
İkincisi
anxiety is the
ise
right name for what's
eğer
happening.
stres gerçekten doğru bir isim mi
We
bunu
have
bir
a
karar
qualitative
vermeniz lazım.
response all the time. So it might
Bu
be
tarz
like,
bir
I was excited for this presentation and before this presentation I kind of felt a little
savunma
nervous.
mekanizmasını
I could have
çok
said, oh, I
fazla
must be
kontrol altına
anxious. But
alabiliriz
instead
ve
I said, no, I
hemen
think I'm really
stres
excited.
altındayım
And that
diyebiliriz
shift in
ama
thinking
aslında belki
actually
de
makes a huge
sadece
difference in terms of how we feel about what we're engaging. The
eğleniyorsunuzdur.
third thing we want to watch out for is anxiety going off
Üçüncü
the rails
ise
with catastrophic thinking. And again, that's overestimating risk, underestimating our ability to handle it. So if something is feeling really
riskleri gözümüzde büyütüp yararları gözümüzde
really
küçülterek
anxiety
kontrol
provoking,
altından çıkmak.
key questions to ask yourself are,
Kendinize sormanız
am I
gereken en
imagining
önemli
this to be
soru.
worse than it might really be?
Bunu
So
ben
that I bring
gerçekten
that estimation of risk down.
olacağından daha mı
And
kötü
also,
düşünüyorum diye
do I have
sormanız
more
lazım.
say in how this is going to go than I'm giving myself credit for? Are there things I can do to actually increase my sense of control, not feel as helpless as I do right now?
Ben bunu
So
gözümde
that's
büyütüyor muyum
really
yoksa belki de
entirely. We sort of
daha
get in
kontrol
the
altına
mirror
alabilmek
again
için
of not
yapabileceğim
overestimating
şeyler var mı
yourself
diye
or underestimating your
sormanız
own powers.
gerekebilir. Sizin
I'm gonna start to wrap
stresin
up, but here
gözünüzde
is the
büyüttüğünüz
bottom
gibi
line.
kendi gücünüzü de oldukça
Most of the
küçültüyorsunuz.
time, we don't need to feel anxious
Birçok
about feeling
zaman
anxious. It really is the
stres
other
altında
way around.
hissettiğimiz zaman
And
stres altında
whether
hissetmemize
you
gerek
want
yok.
it there or not, or whether it's helping us or
Bunu
not, if we want to get it under control,
eğer kontrol
knowing
altına
the
almak
basics of how it
istiyorsanız
unfolds really does put you in the driver's seat of knowing how to calm yourself when you feel anxious.
kendinizi
As
stresli
you don't have
hissettiğinizde
to
nasıl
feel like it's something you are
sakinleştireceğinizi
at the mercy of.
You spoke about
öğrenmelisiniz.
breathing and how you were skeptical in the early days. Do you have a particular breathing practice you like?
I do. Once I got over my
Bunun
snobbery
stresin nasıl sonuçları
about
olduğunu
breathing,
ve bunun
I added something called square breathing
eski
or box
çağlarda
breathing, and
nasıl bir mantığı
most
olduğunu
people have
söylemiştiniz.
heard of
Peki
this, and
nefesimizi
it's
kontrol
really
altına almak
simple.
için
It's where you breathe in on
uyguladığınız
a
bir
count of
yöntem
three.
var
So
mı?
1, 2, 3, and I'm
Aslında
actually gonna
var.
walk us through it as a group.
Bunu
And you
size de
hold it for a count
uygulatacağım.
of 3, 1, 2, 3.
1 2
Then
3
you
diye
exhale
sayıyorsunuz,
slowly
nefes alıyorsunuz.
on a count of
Nefes
3, 1,
alıyorsunuz, 1
2,
2
3,
3
and
diye
then you
sayıyorsunuz.
wait.
Nefes
1,
veriyorsunuz,
2,
1
3.
2 3
So
diyorsunuz.
1, 2, 3 in, 1, 2, 3 hold,
Bekliyorsunuz,
1,
1
2,
2
3
3.
exhale, 1, 2, 3 wait. Okay, so let's all do it together, but
Hadi
here's
hep birlikte
my
bunu yapalım.
instruction to you.
Ama
If you really want this to work,
eğer bunu gerçekten işe
picture
yaramasını
the nerves
istiyorsanız
on the surface of your lungs getting the message. You're not just breathing to breathe, right? You're breathing because you
ciğerlerinizdeki
are talking
hücrelerin
to this system
gerçekten
and
bu
using
mesajı
those nerves
aldığını
to communicate to your
hayal
brain
etmenizi
that everything's
istiyorum.
okay. All right.
Eğer
So
hücreleriniz beyninizle
we're
iletişime
off breath a little bit.
geçebiliyorsa
All right, ready?
her şey iyi.
Breathe in slowly. 1,
Şimdi yavaşça nefes
2,
alın. 1,
3.
2,
Hold
3.
it.
Tutun.
1,
1,
2,
2,
3.
3.
Exhale slowly. 1,
Yavaşça nefes verin. 1,
3.
2,
Now
3.
pause. 1,
Şimdi durun. 1, 2, 3.
that's it.
Hepsi bu kadar.
And you can do it a few
Ve bunu
times.
birkaç defa
If you're really
yapabilirsiniz.
anxious a
Eğer ki
lot,
çok
you should be
fazla
practicing this
stresli
when you're not anxious
hissediyorsanız
so that you can
bunu
slip right into that groove.
bunu stresli olmadığınızı da
Really
yapıp
powerful.
kendinize
And I'm a
alıştırabilirsiniz.
little embarrassed about how long
Ben
it took me to get on the breathing
bu aslında
train.
çok
I mean, it's actually
işe yarar bir
incredible
şey
if
ve
he's
bunu
doing that
açıkçası
with you,
daha önce
the
nasıl fark
whole
etmedim diye kendimden bir parça utanıyorum.
whatever excitement in my stomach just sort of dissipates.
Ee, Aslında bu oldukça garip çünkü içimde bir neşe vardı. Bu bir anda uçtu gitti.
Useful for the members, so let's get right to them. First up, Gordon wants to know
Gordon
about helping other people. How can we
diğer
help
insanlara nasıl yardım
if,
edebileceğimiz
a friend
hakkında
or a family
sormak istiyor.
member
Örneğin eğer ki bir arkadaşımız veya aile üyemiz
excessive anxiety?
aşırı derecede stres hissediyorsa ne
The
yapabiliriz
first thing I would say, just
diye
like
öğrenmek istiyor.
generally
Söylemek istediğim ilk şey
is we'll get to the excessive piece, but just
hmm,
people need
aşırı
validation
kısmına
that anxiety
gelebiliriz ama
exists
ondan
most of the
öncesinde
time. And
çoğu
one of the
insan aslında
hazards
stresin normal bir şey
of
olduğunu
anxiety
duymak
being
ister.
talked about as though it's everywhere and always pathological is that people experience normal anxiety. And then
İnsanlar
they think,
normal
"Oh, I'm
stres
having
hisseder
anxiety. Oh
ve
no,
stres hissediyorum.
this is
Hayır,
really wrong."
stresliyim. Ben
And so
ya ben de
one
yanlış bir
quick
şeyler
thing you can
bir
do
şeyler
is
yanlış
anytime
gidiyor
somebody's
olmalı
anxious, if they're
diye
like, "Oh my
düşünüyorlar
gosh, I have
ama
a big talk
burada
tomorrow and I'm
aslında
anxious," you can say, "You're having the right reaction.
diyebileceğiniz
That's
tek şey
really like that's
doğru
good
bir
for
tepki
you." And
veriyorsun.
there's nothing wrong with being anxious
Senin
about a talk, or there's
şu
nothing wrong
anda
with having to go talk about
stresli
something that you're
olman
anxious
hakkında yanlış bir
and
şey
that
yok.
making you anxious. That's
Şu anda
evidence that you
stres
work perfectly,
altında
right? So
olman
that alone
vücudun
reassures people a lot.
doğru çalıştığını
And
gösteriyor.
then I think the next step
Ardından
you can do is to
e,
say,
öbür
if it gets
adımsa
uneasy, if it gets
eğer
too much, more anxiety than is helpful to you, right?
sana
Even
yardımcı
unused, like
olacaktan
dishes,
daha
if you
fazla bir
happen to
stres
live that
hissetmeye
quickly,
başladıysanız
you can actually dial it back. So walk them through why breathing works. Everybody knows they're supposed to
e,
breathe. Very few people know why. And so that's
onlara
number
nasıl
one.
nefes almaları gerektiğini
And so
anlatabilirsiniz.
what
Herkes
I'm
nasıl
trying
nefes
to do,
alması
I will
gerektiğini
say,
bilmesi lazım.
think about your
Ben
anxiety being on a
insanlara
dial, right? And if it's a 0 to 10 dial, 2 to 3 you actually tend to do a better job with whatever you're needing to do if you have a little energy.
stresinizi bir parça
Once it gets into 4, 5, 6,
seviyesini
7,
kısmaya çalışın.
you
Eğer
start being
0 ile
trouble.
10 arasında bir
And so
stresiniz
I
varsa onu
teach
2
people
ile
to
3 arasında
use the
düşürmeniz sizin
breathing
için daha iyi
exercise
olabilir.
on the dial.
Ve
But that idea
nefes
of you're
egzersizleri
not at
yapmak
the
bunu
mercy of
aslında
this.
bir
You can
parça
be in the driver's seat on
azaltır.
this, and you can use breathing or reframing or questioning your own thinking. Is really helpful
Nefesinizi
because
kontrol
it gives a
altına
general
alarak,
sense of like,
nasıl
look, is it
adlandırdığınızı
anxiety or
değiştirerek
really
veya
not?
kendinizi kontrol altına alarak
Katerina describes
stresi
an
kontrol altına
anxiety that
alabilirsiniz.
leads them to avoid things. So meeting new people because it's scary. Do
Stresin
you
öbür özelliklerinden
maybe
bir
recommend
tanesi
that
de
kind of
bir parça
avoidance tactic around
kaçış
anxiety?
mekanizması oluşturması.
Oh, yeah,
Örneğin
yeah.
yeni bir
So
insanla
much breath avoidance.
tanışacakları
This is
zaman
actually the most most important thing we need to say when it
Tanışacakları
gets to talking
zaman
about anxiety.
stres altına giriyorlar
So,
ve korkuyorlar.
when we're frightened of something,
Bir şeyden
our
korktuğumuz zaman
instincts are like, get away. Right? And you see,
bizim
that is a tiger or a
hislerimiz
bad driver.
kaç der.
Those are really good instincts.
Ve bunlar
And
aslında güzel
so when we
hislerdir.
remain frightened of something that's in our everyday
Hani
lives, we can
günlük
actually go
hayatınızda
there
bir şeyden
and avoid it.
korktuğunuzda bundan
Here is, if you remember any
kaçmanız
from what we
muhtemeldir.
talk about today, these are the three words I want you to remember most.
Hatırlamanız gereken,
Avoidance feeds anxiety.
hatırlamanızı istediğim 3 kelime var.
So,
Kaçmak
here's the practice. It's
stresi
actually
besler.
wonderfully, I think it's fascinating science on this. All right. So, say Katerina, you're thinking about going to a party.
Diyelim ki
Like,
partiye
you're invited to
gitmeyi
a party
düşünüyorsun.
and
Bir
you're
partiye
like,
davet
okay, I'm gonna try to
edildin.
go to this party.
Tamam, bu partiye
And
gideceğim
then
dedin.
it's
Ve
time
daha
to go to the
sonra
party and you
partiye gitme
feel your
zamanı
anxiety
geldiği
starting to
zaman da
bubble up and you're like, forget it.
stres
Cancel.
yaşamaya başladığını
Here's
fark
what's gonna
ediyorsun ve
happen. You'll go
o
from
boş
feeling
ver,
very, very
iptal edeceğim
anxious
diyorsun.
to suddenly feeling much,
Oldukça
much better.
stresli hissediyorsun ve
So,
sonra bir
this
anda
is the first
rahatlıyorsun.
helping of how avoidance feeds anxiety, which is that it feels good.
Reddetme
We call it a
stresi
reinforcing
besler
experience. You feel
çünkü
bad, you avoid
sana
it,
iyi
you feel
hissettirir.
better.
Kötü
Signal
hissediyorsundur,
avoidance is something not
reddedersin,
fun. Or
kaçarsın
not fun,
ve
but
iyi
it solves the
hissetmeye
problem.
başlarsın. Çok eğlenceli
Because again,
değildir ama sorunu çözer.
because you haven't gone to the party, nothing
Partiye
challenges your
gitmediğin
beliefs about
için
how frightening that party is. The party remains
içindeki seni
whatever you
korkutan
have
o
pictured in your mind. You know, people not talking
senin
to
içindeki seni
you,
korkutan
you know,
parçaya
people, you know,
bir zorluk
whatever. Like
çıkarmadığın
whatever
için
you have
korkmaya
imagined
devam
about what makes
edeceksin.
that party scary goes
Bu
unchallenged.
partiyi
But go
senin
to
için
the party.
korkunç yapan şey
You know,
her neyse
practice it,
partiye
but
gittiğinde bunu bir
not
challenge'a
a lot,
dönüştürürsün.
better
Ama
than
eğer
expected. But if you
gitmezsen,
don't
eğer
go,
gidersen
it remains
aslında
very
düşündüğün
frightening.
kadar kötü
So
olmadığını
that is
görürsün ama
how
eğer
avoidance
gitmezsen
actually
gözünde korkunç
becomes this
kalmaya
anxiety.
devam
It
eder.
feels good to get
Yani
away, and it
bir
actually
şeyden
doesn't give
kaçınmak
us any
aslında
PTSD data.
stresini
So when you go
giderek
see a
büyütür.
clinician for treatment of anxiety, often we will start by asking,
Stresi,
you know, what are you avoiding as a result of your anxiety?
stresle başa
And we
çıkmak
will work
için
with
bir
you on
doktora
what we call
gidersen
graduated exposure, which is like
bir
basically baby steps.
biz
Getting
buna
in there,
hmm,
right? So we'll say,
başa
could you
çıkma
do a small thing with a couple
yöntemi
people, right?
diyoruz.
Could you use your breathing to make that bearable? All right, and we would just sort of work you into it very, very
Sadece bebek
slowly
adımları gibi seni
because
böyle
the
yavaş yavaş
solution to
bu
anxiety is
korktuğun
often what we call
şeylerin
exposure,
içerisine
just making yourself do it. But
yürütürüz
you are
ve
not alone
kendine bunu
in
yapmanı
this sense of like,
sağlarız ve bu
you know, why not just not go? It feels better to not go.
eğer
And
gitmemek
that's
daha iyi
something that we as clinicians work
hissettiriyorsa
really,
niye
really hard on.
gitmem, niye
And we'll tell
gideyim
you, you
ki
know, with
düşüncesine
pandemic and kids and
sokabilir.
school,
Örneğin
you
bu
know, that and you know, we've always
pandemide
known if a child is
çocuklar ve
frightened of school,
okullar
the solution is
hepimiz
get
biliyoruz
them
ki
to school.
çocuklar
Even if
aslında
they
okuldan
sit in the
korkuyorlar,
teacher's like,
yani
you know, back office.
korkarlar ve eğer
Physically
ki
being at school is
sadece
better than at
öğretmenlerin
home if
odasında
it's
dahi
more less
oturacaklarsa okula
scary.
gitmeleri lazım. Çünkü okulun
So
içerisinde
another
bulunmak evde oturmaktan çok daha iyi.
area of anxiety that's popping up in the chat is dealing with it in our sort of children. Robert
Stres hakkında
wants to
bahsedilen
know,
başka bir şeylerden bir tanesi ise
are there any
çocuklarımız
differences between words
üzerindeki
like anxiety
etkisi.
or worry or fear as it might pertain to how a teenager is describing
Stres,
or trying to put a name
korku,
to
endişe,
what they're feeling?
I think it means
gençler
usually
nasıl
whatever it
adlandırmaları
means.
gerektiklerini
But I
bilmiyorlar.
will
Doğrusunun
say,
hangisi olduğunu
teenagers
bilmiyorlar.
use the term anxiety a lot.
Bana
And they use
kalırsa
it very
gençler
broadly.
stres kelimesini çok
And
fazla ve
I
çok yaygın bir şekilde kullanıyorlar.
I've been practicing for a very long time, and then in the
Uzun
last
bir
6 to 10 years,
zamandır
I started to notice like kids use this term a lot.
bu
And
konu üzerine
I wasn't
çalışıyorum
quite
ve
sure what to
10
make of it.
yıl
And then I was
diyebilirim
actually
ki son 10
reading
yıl diyebilirim hatta.
Jane Eyre. No, it was Pride and Prejudice. Pride and Prejudice. And Mrs. Bennet. I don't know if you remember her. She's like the kind of piece of work mom in that book. There was a line in the book that was whenever Mrs. Bennet was discontented, she fancied herself to be nervous.
Mrs. Bennet ne
And I
zaman
thought, oh, I think that's often what I'm seeing with
geri
teenagers. They
düşmüş
say, I feel
hissetse
anxious,
stresli
when they usually
der.
mean not calm. I don't feel
Ama
calm.
aslında
And so
stres değil de sadece rahat hissetmiyorlar. Bir genç bir genç stresli hissediyorum dediğinde ona bana ne olduğunu anlatmasını hissediyorum. Bir konser var ve arkadaşlarımla birlikte gideceğim falan anlatırlar ve dinlediğim zaman söyledikleri şeyin aslında stresten farklı bir şey olduğunu, örneğin bu yüzden mutlu olabileceklerini, heyecanlı olabileceklerini falan görüyorum.
And sometimes they are anxious. And that's when there's
Bazen
some
gerçekten
trust, right? When they're
stresliler
like,
ve
I'm feeling
bu
anxious
gerçekten de
because I have
tehlikeli
my driver's
olduğu
test tomorrow and I am not ready.
risk
Then
altında oldukları yerler.
that is anxiety.
Örneğin
There is a threat they could fail that driver's test,
sürücü
right? So
ehliyet
listen
sınavına
to them
gireceğim
and
ve
say they are
başarısız olabilirim. Bu
evolving,
tabii
right?
ki de
You know,
bir
if they're anxious about something, be like, yeah,
strestir
well,
çünkü
okay,
başarısız
so like, that's
olabilirsin.
kind of scary. Like, let's see what we can do to reduce your sense of risk, increase your sense of control.
Senin
But
bu yüzden
often
senin
it's very important
risk
that we help them
ihtimalini düşürüp
bring more nuance
kontrolünü
to the language they use around a certain sense of
arttırmamız
being scared
lazım.
of. And what's so nice is
Güzel olan
like
şey
as
şu
soon as you're
ki
saying or a kid saying, I
bir
feel really anxious
gencin
about, school tomorrow, and you're like, what's making you anxious? They're like, new
okul
classroom, new
hakkında
kids,
çok
like, don't know where things are
stres
gonna be.
altındayım
And you say,
dediğinde,
yeah, like, we do
neden
feel
korkuyorsun
apprehensive, like that
dediğinde,
is like there's a lot there, and also maybe a little
dediğimizde
excited.
işte
If you
okuldan, öğrencilerden,
think of that with words that
öğretmenlerden
are
bunu hissetmen
more
normal
open than the big
deriz.
generic of anxiety, that act is in and of itself therapeutic. Kids are like, yes, I am apprehensive and also excited, right? That they feel heard, they feel better, and they have a better language. So what I
Ee,
watch for especially
istedikleri duyguyu
is
nasıl
kids saying, I
adlandırmaları
have
gerektiklerini
anxiety.
anladıkları zaman hem daha iyi bir dilleri olur
I
hem
like
daha
it
iyi
if you're
hissederler.
feeling anxious. Because I think, there is this sense of like, I have anxiety. I think there's very much among adolescents a sense of like, I have anxiety. And what I try not to say is, well, everybody has anxiety at some level.
Birisi
So I
bana
don't want to be
gelip
dismissive, but you
stres
really have
yaşıyorum
that negative
dediğinde herkes
connotation
stres
to
yaşar belli bir
feeling
seviyede
like
derim.
and a diagnosis that they would need to
Ama
be concerned about.
bu
Several folks want
gelip
to
geçen
know
bir duygu
how
mu
can they
yoksa
tell
gerçekten
when
endişelenmen
to
gereken
seek
bir şey
help,
mi? Asıl önemli olan bu.
when anxiety has become too crippling.
This is a great place to wrap up, right? This is a perfect place to wrap up. So mostly this has been an ad for anxiety. Like, don't be frightened of it.
Ee,
Be curious about it. Trust that it's trying to tell you something if it feels too uncomfortable.
Stresten korkanlar
Try
hakkında
the
ne
strategies to
diyebiliriz?
get it under
Aslında bu
control.
çok iyi bir soru. Stresten korkmayın, onu kabul edin.
Let's go back to 'em. If you feel like your anxiety
Eğer
is showing up and there's no reason,
stres
like
altında
there's no
hissediyorsanız
threat,
ve
nothing to be worried
herhangi
about,
bir
that
sebep
would be a great
yoksa
time to seek
bu
out support. The other
sizin
is,
yardım
your
istemeniz
anxiety,
için
like,
güzel
there's
bir
a threat,
andır.
or like my anxiety is off
Ama
the charts and making me miserable or getting in the way of my life.
eğer ki
That's
stres
a good
altında
time to seek
hissediyorsanız,
support. So,
aynı zamanda stres altında hissediyorsanız
pretty
ve bu sizin
straightforward
hayatınızı
in terms of
etkilemeye
how to
başlıyorsa bu da
define
yardım almanız
what
gereken
is it
anlardan bir
concerning,
tanesidir.
but I really want you to know,
Asıl bilmenizi istediğim şey
most
şu ki
anxiety does not need to make you feel anxious about its own presence.
birçok stres sizi kendi varlığı hakkında böyle kötü hissettirmemeli.